So that was a lot of prayer requests, and I want to throw in two more that didn't get into the mix there into the box there or the basket in the back. One, Ann Knox. Some of you know Ann Knox, others you may not. She is a longtime member. Even though she lives in Florida, she's still a member here of Smithfield Christian Church, an important part of this family. But she's going to be having knee replacement surgery next week, so we want to be praying for her. Our good friend Raina, and she's going to murder me for even mentioning her this morning, but next week is going to be kind of her last Sunday with us. She's going to be moving to Virginia Beach, and that's going to be kind of just a long ways to commute, but she's going to be getting involved at a church out there when she moves. But we've loved having her come and up on stage with us and helping us with the welcome times and stuff, and also just being a good friend and being a part of this community. But she assured me this would not be her last Sunday next week, so she'll still be back from time to time. But be sure either today or next Sunday you give some encouragement to her and just say how much you've appreciated her being around. So we will definitely miss you. So excuse me. So back in the fall, I hit my 7-year mark here at Smithfield Christian Church. And it's crazy to think how that time has really just, in some ways, kind of blown past. In other ways, it seems like it's kind of just always been a thing. It's not really been just 7 years. And during that time, in the fall, the elders shared that when we came around to this time of year, I would be taking a 5-week sabbatical. And so tomorrow, actually, that sabbatical is going to be starting up. So tomorrow morning, I'll be heading out of town for a little bit. Not for the entire 5 weeks, just for a little bit of this week, and then I'll be back in town. I'll be out of town some more at the end of it. I'll be in Florida. Beth and I'll be down there for a conference, and then some other things, maybe Harry Potter land, some things like that. But during that time, the whole point of the sabbatical, the whole point of it is for me to sort of, like what that song was singing about earlier, and like what Bill talked about in his community meditation, for me to sort of unplug and to rest and to be recharged and to be refilled. I had a professor in Bible college who talked about how he said that in church life, a lot of times many people draw from the same well, so to speak. And after a while, if you continue to draw from the same well and you don't do anything to sort of replenish it or let it rest, it dries up. And so my hope is to take some time to step back and to be ministered to. I want to be spending time on the upcoming 5 Sundays. I'll be worshiping with other churches. My family will be here off and on and stuff. Sometimes I'll be off by myself. Sometimes they'll be with me. But we'll still be... someone asked, and I want to make sure this is clarified, I am not going to interview at other churches while I'm gone, okay? Someone literally asked me, are you going to be going interviewing at other churches? No, I'm not at all. I'm looking forward to coming back after the sabbatical and having 7+ more years here with Smithfield Christian Church. So that's right. So with that starting up tomorrow, I thought today would be a perfect day for us to kind of look at this idea of rest, of taking breaks, because we all, in our lives, in different manners, when we really stop and think about it, we all at times can be going just faster and doing more and just feeling more and more of a burden on ourselves. We're kind of that's kind of how we are as a culture. We like the idea of going further, doing more, finding more ways to do things. In fact, back on September 16th of 2018, a lady by the name of Denise Mueller Koronek, she broke the bicycle land speed record. Now, when I read that, and before I tell you what the speed was, I thought, I bet she was going like 40 miles an hour, right? I mean, 40 would be pretty fast and terrifying on a bicycle. Well, the original record was 167 miles an hour. She broke the record by going 183.9 miles per hour. She did this out on the Bonneville Salt Flats, where they kind of have done racing and testing and things like that. In fact, I think we have a picture of her and her bike. And actually what they did is they used a dragster, to get her up almost to the top speed. And then they released her from that. She then had to pedal to the top speed and sustain it. She had this special geared bike to where she would, I'm thinking how fast your feet had to go to pedal that fast, but she got to this speed. And of course, this is an amazing feat to go that fast. And I kind of wonder if after a while of getting up to that point, do you even really recognize how fast you're really going and what speed you're really going at. And that's an amazing thing. That's an amazing kind of feat to accomplish of doing that. And for some people, that's how they're tuned, right? That's what they enjoy to do. Maybe some people literally enjoy going fast and wanting to just go as fast as possible. I was joking with my son Brennan last week. We were driving somewhere in the car, and I was kind of accelerating. I told him, I said, you used to hate it whenever I would try and like accelerate it fast. If I would kind of hit the gas, he would always fuss at me because he hated that feeling of like we're going to go a little too fast. But sometimes in life, there are some people that it's not so much about the literal speed that they like to go. For some people, it's more, I guess you could say, like a figurative thing of the speed of their life and how quickly they're going or how much is going on in their life, whether it's work or family or even just the experiences of life of wanting to get so much out of life. And we can have those moments in our life and we think they're awesome and they're incredible. But the issue is that many times it's not good enough right there, and then we want to top it, and we want to have more, and we want to do more, and we want to see more and experience more, and it seems like it's just more and more, and we can't ever get enough. And it seems like, for the most part, in our culture, in our world today, we don't really celebrate the opposite, right? I don't know if I've ever seen a Dateline special or 2020 episode where they reported on the guy that took the 2-day long nap, right? That never happens. We never get excited and congratulate somebody on taking an extended vacation and stuff. In fact, we kind of sometimes even look at people who do that kind of incredulously, and we kind of look at them and we say comments like, well, it must be nice, or I wish I had that kind of time, and we react. When people take breaks, when people slow down and do these kinds of things, we react like either it's such an extremely rare thing, or we even act like people have no such business taking a break or slowing down, even though, as we've seen already a couple times this morning, as we're going to see some more, that the Bible, that God's Word, God expects us to take rest, and even in some ways, I believe that He commands us to slow up and to take rest at different times. Now, in the Bible, it's called the Sabbath. You've probably seen that word, you've heard that word, and it's one of those words that we don't really use in our context today, in our conversations and stuff. But the word Sabbath really just means to cease. It just means to stop something, to take a break, to no longer do something. And while this idea of Sabbath is kind of counter to our culture and our way of life, for God, it is very much a part of His rhythm. And it's not about laziness. I think sometimes we get this idea kind of mixed up that we think it's all about, of being lazy. And sometimes people like to toss out different passages from the Bible, like 2 Thessalonians 3:10. The one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. Or Ecclesiastes 10:18. Through laziness the rafters sag, but because of idle hands the house leaks. But friends, there is a big difference between laziness and idleness and Sabbath and rest and allowing God to refresh us and recharge us. In the past few years, we've even seen how in the health world industry, even this idea of rest is becoming more and more an important part of it. And fitness coaches and doctors are realizing the important element that rest just is, and how important it is that we get good sleep, we get good rest. A person who works out, their body, their muscles, they need time to recover. For us, when we work our minds and we work very hard with our minds, we need time to kind of reset and kind of turn over and start over again. We need these breaks. We need rest. And I love how Bill's community devotion kind of parallels a little bit of what I want to talk about this morning of rest. And even this very first thing that we see in the Bible, I think echoes what he talked about earlier, the fact that even God rested. Even God rested. You think about the creation account that Bill talked about earlier. The Bible opens up with that phrase that so many of us are familiar with. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God goes on, and like Bill talked about, each day He creates these different things. Day 1, He creates light and darkness, or day and night. Day 2, the separation of the expanse of the skies from the water below. And then on day 3, He creates dry ground and plants. And then on day 4, He creates the lights of the skies, meaning the stars, the sun. On day 5, he creates the animals of the sea and the birds of the air. Day 6 creates the land animals, even including humans. And each of these days, it's kind of interesting because each of these days in the scriptures, it starts out the same way. It says, and God said, and then he said it, and it happened, and it took place. And then each of these days also end in the same way, where it says, and then there was evening, and then there was morning. But then we come to the very last day in Genesis 2 and verse 1, and it's a little bit different. It says this in verse 1, thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now, there's a few things that I want us to kind of notice real quick before we move on from this passage. First of all, is that the fact that God rested. Up to this point, God, every single day, he was doing something. He was creating and doing these incredible things. And then when we get to the very last one, it only mentions that he rested. But when we think of resting, sometimes we think of it in the terms of like, man, I'm worn out. I need to go sit down. I need to rest from this. But that's not really what it was for God. It probably would have been more accurate to say that God just stopped, that God ceased, that God had accomplished what he had set out to do. And it wasn't because he was worn out. He stopped because he had finished what he was intending to do. But the other thing that happened here is not only did he rest, but God also blessed that day that he rest. It's interesting because he didn't bless any of the other days. In some ways, you could say, well, why didn't God bless that first day? Because that was the day he started it all. Or even you could wonder, why didn't God bless the sixth day when God created mankind? Because we have this special relationship with him. But it was the last day, the day when God did nothing, the day when God rested, the day when God ceased, when he Sabbathed. That was the day that he blessed. But the last thing about this is that this day doesn't even end like the rest of the days in the scriptures there. There was no, and there was evening, and there was morning, the seventh day. It doesn't have a typical ending like the rest of those days in this account. And some have said the reason that that's not in there is because you could almost say that the seventh day was sort of the culmination the goal of all of creation. For God to create everything, to bring it all about, and then for him to rest with his creation, for him to be present with his creation. Because it's interesting, because every time that we see God's presence in the Bible, the majority of the time, it's referred to him as resting. If you go back to the Old Testament where the tabernacle or the temple, either one of them are mentioned, and God's presence is there in this place called the Holy of Holies or the holiest place, and it was said that God's presence came and rested over the Ark of the Covenant. Or in Acts chapter 2, if we jump to the New Testament, when Jesus, right before he ascends to heaven, he tells his apostles, go into Jerusalem, wait until I send my Spirit to guide you, to help you. And they go and they do that. And it says that while they were there, waiting for the Spirit to come, it said that a sound of a rushing wind came, and then God's Spirit rested over them. It looked like tongues of fire. If we go to Jesus' baptism, we see that after he is baptized, it said that the heavens opened and the Spirit of God descended like a dove and rested on him. There are these pictures over and over again throughout the scriptures of these moments where God's presence comes and rests with us, which seems to be the opposite of how we typically think we get God's presence to come into our life. A lot of times when we think, when I need more of God in my life, we think of, okay, well, what do I need to do more of? I need to read the Bible more. I need to pray more. I need to give more sacrificially. I need to serve more sacrificially. But we find that really God's presence comes and rests with us when we find ways to slow up and to be still and to give him the space to come and rest with us. But not only did we see that God rested, we also see that Jesus rested. And this was a common thing for Jesus. Many different times he would go off by himself, he would go off on his own, and he would pause the things he was doing, he would rest from his ministry, he would cease, he would Sabbath. We see after Jesus' baptism, before he started into his ministry, he went off by himself into the wilderness alone. Before he chose his apostles, the 12 that would be with him, he went off alone. After he had done some ministry of ministering to people and helping people, he sends off his 12 apostles to go and do the ministry. At that point, he goes off by himself and he retreats by himself. After even learning of the death of his cousin in his grief, he goes off by himself. And even the night of his arrest, right before he is crucified, Jesus takes his apostles, he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and then even within that garden, he goes off by himself to spend time alone to rest. So often, Jesus, he took this time to rest, to stop his ministry. And if you think about it, I mean, Jesus is the most powerful, wisest prophet or teacher or healer the world would ever see. And he knew this about himself. He knew of the power that he had. He knew of what he had to offer for us. But he also knew that he only had a limited amount of time with us. And so if Jesus knows all that he is capable of, if he knows all that he can do, but he also knows that he's only with us for a short amount of time, then logically, I think I would start to think, well, I better start doing as much as I can. I better bear down and not take these breaks. I got to keep on going because if I take a break, I'm going to miss out on these opportunities. I need to accomplish and just do absolutely as much as possible. But that's not what he did. Instead, he slowed up and he stopped. Even after he sent his apostles out, he demonstrates this with them. He brings them back together and he kind of calls them away to a time of rest. We see in Mark chapter 6 and verse 30, it says, the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all he had done, all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Now, unfortunately, it didn't quite work out. When they got to this solitary place, they found thousands of people looking for Jesus, and Jesus ends up ministering to them and feeding the thousands of people. But Jesus knew that they needed this time away. And again, Jesus understood that even with his apostles, he only had a limited amount of time. He only had a short amount of time. And instead of doing more and more and more and filling up all the time, he took time to stop, to Sabbath, to cease, and to rest. You see, friends, when we see of how God rested and we see the example of Jesus resting, I believe fully that Jesus calls us to rest. I believe that he's calling us today to rest. I believe that in many ways, for a lot of people, the call to rest, the call to stop, to take a break, to take a Sabbath, in some ways, I think that could even be scarier for some people than the call to go. It can be more intimidating for some people, the idea of stopping and slowing up, than it is for us to go, because we like the idea of having goals. We like the ideas of, I'm going to accomplish this and we're going to be productive. You know, it's interesting, back at when the lockdown took place back in 2020, in many ways, it was a blessing for our family. Now, look, I in no way want to belittle or make light of the severity of the situations that people have gone through, people who have been sick or even died from COVID. I don't want to make jokes about people that have been overworked and overburdened because of the different things that happen. But for our family, when we came into 2020, we were running at a pretty fast pace, a pretty full plate for all of us. Our kids were in school and everything that's kind of involved there. They were both also doing sports. Brennan was in a couple clubs at school. We had church events going on. Beth and I, we both were working. You may not know this, but Beth works from home. She does bookkeeping for a few different companies. But with work also. But then we also were managing just our schedules of being involved in different things together as a family. And even at that time, you may remember, those of you who were here at the time, Beth's grandmother, who was 100, was living with her parents over in Hampton. And so we were doing our best to be involved with their life and the things going on. And we kind of, after a while, didn't realize just how much that we were doing. And it wasn't until that release valve got pulled on our life and things all came to a screeching halt that we realized just how important it was for our family to take some time to slow up and to stop a few things. You know, we did some things that we never really had planned before. We did things like every evening we would sit on the back deck and we would read a book together. We had this tradition where every summer Beth reads one of the Harry Potter books to the kids, and then we watched the movie afterwards. And we started that early that year, and we read one of the books every evening sitting on the deck. Every Friday, the school system was giving out meals and just saying, we've purchased this food already through the companies. We need to give this to everybody. Come and get this food. And so they were giving out. So we would ride our bikes up to the apartments up the road here to go and get meals together. We didn't travel. We didn't go places. We were just together. And we did a lot of stuff that we would never even had thought about if we hadn't been forced to just stop and slow up for a little while. And maybe for you, maybe you've not quite figured just how you slow down and rest. And maybe it's not even rest like we normally think about it. Maybe it's not so much the rest of stopping of how you might normally think it is, of the speed of things and stuff like that. Maybe it's more about the pace of, maybe instead of it being the pace of work, maybe it's more of the responsibility, the burdens you feel at work. Maybe it's not so much of how many things you're doing. Maybe it's just that weight that you carry. Maybe it's not so much being involved in a lot of things and even being involved in a lot of things at church, but maybe you just feel that burden of, I've got to be more spiritual, so I've got to do more things. I've got to read more and pray more and learn more and serve more. Or maybe it's not even so much of like, I've got to get my kids involved in everything. Maybe it's just more the pressure of, I've got to somehow raise my kids without ruining them and ruining their future. We can become so stressed out and overwhelmed in life in so many different ways. And again, it may not necessarily be the pace of life. It might just be the weight of life. Or maybe it's the weight of your health or a family member's health, or maybe even the weight of an important decision going on in your life. You see, there are so many things in our life that can put our lives out of control. And too often, I think we think if we can just work a little harder, if we could just work a little longer on this, if we could just dedicate more time to whatever's going on, if I could just get my kids involved in this or that, or if I could just figure out how I can move out of this place and into that place, or if I could just go to that place or be involved, whatever it might be, and it goes on and on and on. But instead, Jesus is calling us to something different. In Matthew 11:28, he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, that idea of a yoke, that's not something we talk about. This is not the middle of the egg that he's referring to. The yoke was a farming apparatus that you used to link up animals together. You hook them up to farm equipment to pull a plow or a wagon or whatever. But when you put these animals together, they've got to be working together. That's the point, to be working at the same pace, going in the same places, doing the same thing. And when Jesus is saying to us is that, look, I don't need you running off doing all these different things. I need you to be close to me. I need you to do life at my pace. I need you to do life my way. I need you to do your career at my pace, in my way. I need you to do your family at my pace, in my way. I need you to do your hobbies at my pace and in my way. I need you to do all of your life at my pace and in my way. You see, so often we get sucked into this paradigm of our culture, this idea of I've got to run faster, I've got to do more, I've got to work harder, I've got to earn more, I've got to get a better paying job so I can buy more for my family, so my family can have this, so we can enjoy these things. But why? Why are we so convinced that the more we have, the happier we'll be? Or maybe for our young people in the room, maybe there's this feeling sometimes you can have that I've got to take the most difficult classes and get the best grades or be in every club or every sport because it looks so great on college applications because I got to get into the best school so I can get the best job, so I can work the most and get the most, and just this cycle over and over again. But again, why? Why do we convince ourselves that we have to have these things? Now, don't get me wrong. We should do our best. God's word encourages us that whatever we do, we work at it for the Lord. We do our best. We work hard at these things. But when we allow ourselves to get caught up in that spinning hamster wheel that's really not going anywhere, and we're running full steam ahead, all because our culture told us, well, that's what you're supposed to do. And we have to have more, and we have to experience more, and we have to buy more. But God, He calls us to a different set of priorities. And I love how the Message translation, or the Message paraphrase actually, it puts Romans chapter 12 and verse 1 and 2. It says this. It says, so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. I want you to take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God has done for you is the best thing that you can do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to the culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you and develops a well-formed maturity in you. God says, I don't need you. I don't want you to run at the pace of the world around you. I want you to live by a different kind of standard, a different kind of way. Live by my standards. But I recognize that that's difficult. I recognize that is really difficult. That the idea of taking a break or taking a rest, to step away from something, to take your foot off the gas pedal for a little while in life, I get that that's difficult. That's why I believe that rest is an act of faith. And you might hear that and you think, well, that doesn't really make sense, because isn't an act of faith like something that you do? Isn't an act of faith an active thing that we do? But the thing is that not doing things, taking a break, taking a rest, a Sabbath, it is an act of faith, and it's trusting that God is going to step into your life, and that He is good, that if you do what He's asked you to do and take that break, then He is going to help you and still provide for you even in the midst of that break. You may remember we studied, I guess actually it's been a couple years now, we studied the book of Exodus, and we saw the Israelites going through the wilderness, and they were on their way to the promised land. And as they did many times, they were whining and complaining to Moses because they needed something, and this time they needed food. And so God provides food for them. He provides this thing they called manna. They didn't know what it was. That's what manna means. What is it? And they didn't know what it was, but God provides it for them. And it says in Exodus 16:19, then Moses said to them, no one is to keep any of it until morning. They were only supposed to take enough for just that day. And then verse 20, however, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. God gives them this food, and God tells Moses, hey, tell them they're only supposed to get enough for one day. They're only supposed to have enough for what they need that day. But unfortunately, as so often happens, is that people wanted to get more. And so they tried to collect more, they tried to keep it, and God caused it to spoil because He didn't want them working beyond what He felt that they needed. And we go on then to verse 21, it says this. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning. So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is the Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any. You see, the point of all this is that God knew what they needed. God knew that they needed food, so He provided food. But He also knew that they needed rest. And so by the Sabbath and by them having to collect on the 6th day, collect extra, not collecting on the 7th day, God knew that they needed rest, so He provided rest. And friends, God knows what you and I need in our life. He knows that we need food. He knows that we need a home. He knows that we need a job. He knows even that we need enjoyment in life. He knows that we need rest. And I believe that just as He called the Israelites to slow up and rest, He's calling us to do the same thing. And so, friends, we've got to find a way to trust Him. Find a way that we can trust Him when we find all those things piling up in life and all those choices in front of us to just do one more thing or join one more thing. That means, again, maybe for our teens, that you have to recognize that if I don't join that club at school so that I can have more time to spend with maybe my church at youth group, or to spend more time serving with my friends, or even to spend time with God, it's trusting that He's still going to get me into that school that He knows that I need to be into. For adults, it's knowing and trusting that if I don't take on that project at work that could be really good for my career, or if I don't work that overtime that would really bring in some extra money, it would be really helpful for my family, but instead I spend time with my family. I don't check my emails at dinner. I don't work on that project on Saturday morning. I say no to work so that I can be the best parent, so I can be the best spouse for my family, or finally have time to spend time with God, reading His Word and praying. I am trusting that He is still going to provide the things that my family needs. So how do we do that? It's a lot of talk up to this point of like, yeah, okay, I should do that. But how do we do that? Well, let me kind of finish things up by just giving two suggestions. In some ways, they're simple suggestions, but again, they're kind of difficult things, I think, sometimes to put into play. And the first one is to say no to something. To simply say no to something. And that's not rocket science. It's not anything difficult, but man, it can be so hard. And I don't know what that is for you. But I'm sure there are probably some things that maybe are even boiling up in your mind right now, and you're like, oh, maybe this might be the thing I need to say no to. My guess is that you could probably very easily come up with a few things that you need to begin to say no to. Now, I'm not talking about temptation, saying no to sin. I'm talking about the things that are stealing away our family time, stealing away our energy, stealing away our enjoyment of life and what God is trying to bless us with. But it starts with just one thing. We don't have to say no to all of it. It starts small and start with one thing. Start with one project. Start with one extra club. Start with one extra thing that's not going to ruin my life and make everything fall apart, but would give me back some of that time and some of that energy that's been stolen away from my life. In fact, if you're an outline person, you take notes, there's a spot in your outline, there's some space there. I would encourage you to write it down. Sometimes we think about those things and then we kind of move on with life and we forget about those things. But when we take time and we actually put pen to paper and we write those things down, they're more concrete in our minds and we actually do something with them. If you're married, I'd encourage you to have a conversation with your spouse, a very honest and real conversation, and say, okay, what do we need to as a family say no to? If you're a student in school, I would encourage you to have a conversation with your parent and say, okay, what do I need to say no to? Because sometimes there's feelings that we have that we don't share with our spouse or our parent or our kids or whatever, and it just kind of boils up until eventually it all explodes. But if we take the time to slow up and to talk and to speak and to talk about those things and plan those things out and figure out what is those things that we can begin to say no to. But it's not just about saying no. I also want to encourage you to say yes to something. Because the point of all of this is not just to do nothing. The point is to pull the things out of our lives and out of our schedules that give us more time with the things that matter most. The things that we can say yes to. Things like saying yes to your kids, saying yes to your spouse, saying yes to even yourself. Sometimes we feel like we have to say yes to everybody else and we have to always say no to ourselves, but sometimes even to say yes to God. You see, just saying no, it's not about just saying no to everything. It's also about finding even small ways that we can say yes to things that become more and more important and a regular part of our life. And things that we can, again, start with small. And I want to encourage you the same thing as I did earlier about the saying no. Write it down, something that you can start in a small way. Even if it's tomorrow, I'm going to say yes to taking a break. In the middle of the day, I'm going to find an opportunity. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to spend it just walking outside with God. I don't know if it's going to be cold tomorrow. Maybe you want to walk inside. Maybe it's finding another way to say yes to your spouse. Look, here's confession time, all right? I hate going to the store, all right? And I love you, Beth. I don't like going to the store with my wife either because I'm a run in there and get it done and run back out to the car as fast as possible. And she's like, now, what else do we need? I'm like, nothing. Let's leave. Let's go. Get out of this place, But she's like, let's look down this aisle. I'm like, no, there's nothing down the aisle. It doesn't exist. Let's go. Let's get out of the store. But sometimes it's saying, yeah, let's go to the store together. Do you need me to go to the store with you? No. But yes, I'm going to go to the store with you. Sometimes it's sitting with your kids and saying, yeah, let's watch this cartoon that I don't care about and have never heard of and don't know anything about, but it's just saying yes to them. It's saying yes, even in small ways, to the things that matter most. Friends, we need to do this. We need to find ways to say no to the things that are stealing the joy and the life out of us and say yes to the things that can bring joy and bring life back into us. Tomorrow I'm going to be heading out of town for a few days. My plan is while I'm gone to be praying, and reading and listening to God. And I don't have much of a plan beyond that. I don't expect to hear the booming voice of God. I don't expect to see any burning bushes out there where I'm going to be. But you know, when we slow life down, when we quiet the noises around us, when we get in a place where we back off the pace of life and we slow up and we begin to give God time to speak, I think we hear God a whole lot more. I think God is speaking to us so often in our lives, but we are running so fast, or we're doing so much, and there's so much noise in our life that we just can't even hear Him speaking to us. The same way He was speaking to Elijah in that cave, in that quiet whisper. I want to challenge you, friends, to slow up, find ways that you can say no to things, and find ways that you can say yes to the important things. Let me pray for us. God, it's wild to think that we need your help to take a break. We joke about needing a vacation. We joke about needing a break, but sometimes, God, we don't do anything about it. And we just run faster, and we run harder, and we do more. And the next thing we know, we get to a point in life where something spills over, or we've missed opportunities, or whatever it might be, and then it's too late. But God, even if it's too late, it's never too late, God. I pray that right now in this moment that you would help each one of us to be very honest with ourselves. Maybe be very honest with our spouse or our kids or our parents, and to have those real conversations, to find those things that we need to say no to find those things that we need to say yes to, and to actually do something about it. God, I pray that you would help those people right here in this room, each one of us. I know that there are different things that are popping to mind for folks right now. Lord, I pray that you would give us that direction and help us to know how to move forward with that it's not just about a sermon on a Sunday morning, but that we can actually do something with this and make it a real part of our life, that we can slow up